Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Police, Fire and Rescue Subcommittee, which has been live streamed and recorded. The recording will be made available on the Council website for public listening. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidelines, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting, writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute, and if you're in the hall, you can do this on your iPhone or iPad. Please don't repeat contributions already made by other members, and no material should be posted in the chat function if it's intended as part of the discussion. As usual, standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin. This is so that we can keep track on whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide the reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. Fraser, can you provide the sediment and any apologies, please?
Thanks, Chair. So we've got 5 members present in the hall, being yourself, Councillors Beretti, Dorward, Slater and Stitt. We've got 4 members on Teams, being Councillors Bell, Howie, Jameson and McFarlane. 2 members not present at the start of the meeting, being Councillor Carruthers and Councillor Hill.
Thank you. I approve members' remote participation. And do any members have a declaration of interest or statement of connection that they wish to make? In that case, we'll go on to the minutes of the previous meeting on the 5th of December. These minutes are for approval. Are we happy to approve? Today, we have Area Commander Derek Heaton. Area Commander Derek Heaton is unable to join us today, but is ably substituted by Group Commander Scott Irving from the Scottish Fire Service. From Police Scotland, with Chief Superintendent Stevie Meikle and Superintendent Alison Wilson. This is your first meeting, so welcome. Members will recall that I offered members the opportunity to submit questions ahead of the meeting today in order that officers can provide a full response. I've received 3 questions, 2 of which relate to reports at items 4 and 5, and accordingly I'll ask Councillor Dorward to table her question during each of these agenda items. The 3rd question was received from Councillor Slater and refers to both the Scottish Fire Service and Police Scotland, and I intend taking this at the conclusion of item 5. In addition to this, in addition to the 3 questions received, I've advised Chief Superintendent Meikle of a question that I would like to raise relating to alleged indiscriminate parking in Dumfries, abuse of the bus parking areas in White Sands and Burnstite Square, and unauthorised entry into the pedestrian area of Dumfries. If we go into the first item, item 4, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Plan, the update, 1st April 2024 to 31st March 2025. Group Commander Scott Irving is here to assist any members that have questions. Scott, do you have anything you would like to add to the report at this stage?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Elected members, I'm pleased to report on behalf of Area Commander Heaton to present another positive report highlighting the good work that has been undertaken within the region in the last few months. As a service, we have been updating our recording and reporting tools and moving towards a national reporting template, which you see before you. It's an evolving document, and I look forward to any feedback you may have. There have been a total of 1,574 incidents in the reporting period, which is a 10% decrease on the same period last year. There were 368 fires, which is a 30% decrease and a testament to the work carried out by our prevention and protection teams. The fire fatality that is indicated within the report has since been reclassified as a murder, but the change came too late to alter the report. There were a total of 80 accidental dwelling fires, and cooking remains the main cause of this fire type. These fires resulted in 3 people being rescued by the crews, with 7 individuals recorded as casualties. Special service incidents have increased slightly to 403 incidents, which resulted in 20 fatalities, 77 non-fatal casualties, and 92 people rescued by crews. From the 86 road traffic collisions, there were 33 people rescued from RTCs by firefighters. Unfortunately, there were 7 fatalities and 52 non-fatal casualties, of which 22 were treated in hospital for serious injuries. There was also a reduction of 34% to 106 deliberate fires through the reporting year. 28 incidents occurred in non-domestic premises, which is also a decrease of 26% on the same period last year. There has been significant drop in UFAS incidents over the 4-year period. The most noticeable decrease coinciding with the change to the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service's UFAS mobilisation policy that took effect on the 1st of July 2023. A total of 228 incidents which were reported in this recording period, a reduction of 68, down 32% on last year's figures. Operational crews, coupled with the prevention and protection teams, have carried out a total of 815 home fire safety visits, of which 310 were from referrals from partners. I feel this is worth highlighting for the collective efforts that go into making communities safer. This work then plays into reducing the number of incidents that I have already covered. The high-performing enforcement team have carried out a total of 519 fire safety audits, which is an increase on the previous year's performance. This is often unheralded work and plays into lowering the number of non-domestic premises incidents. Our excellent community safety engagement team have had another productive period. The variety of work they undertake and the support with partners makes a real difference to the communities across the region. In terms of staffing, there are numerous promotions and processes ongoing, and we are supporting the development of Dumfries and Galway personnel as they seek to advance with their careers. One of our group commanders has recently secured a promotion to the position of area commander, and we wish our former colleague, Group Commander Bobby Lennox, every success in his new post. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thank you for that. I'll open up for members' debate. Can I ask Councillor Dorward if you'd like to table your question at this stage? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your report. And just, to say thanks, it's a retrospective report, thanks to yourselves and all members of Scottish Fire and Rescue Service in Dumfries for the hard work we do. It's a good report. I don't have any questions on that, as you know, because I've tabled something totally different. But thanks also to the backroom staff who do all the hard work in compiling all of this information and put all the statistics together. That's sometimes forgotten, so thanks for that. My question is, because you had a retrospective report, isn't something that's in the report, but I think it's something that's actually quite prescient in terms of the public and public interest, is the issue of increased wildfires across Dumfries and Galway, in fact across Scotland, due to many factors. Some would say climate change, some would say other things, but that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. So I'm conscious that isn't in the report, and that's why I tabled the question. And there is a high risk, given the weather changing in this part of the country, potentially of that happening again, I would suspect. So the questions I have are as follows regarding that. What specific contingency plans do you have in place should wildfires occur again? What lessons have you learned from the wildfire in Galway Forest Park in April this year? Have you been working with other emergency services and other stakeholders, such as park rangers, to address prevention of future wildfire occurrences? Thank you. I know you've got these questions in front of you, so over to you. Cheers. Thank you for your question, Councillor Dorwood. I have a pre-prepared statement I'd like to read. I'm happy to expand on any point within that. So thanks very much for the question. I will try and answer it from a national perspective and then focus on the regional work to give it more context. So the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service are currently in the implementation stage of delivering our new wildfire strategy for enhancing our response to wildfire incidents and our capability aligned with that. The methods used to deal with wildfires, although effective, are very resource intensive and rely upon tactics that have been in place for many decades. The location of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service wildfire resources, equipment, PPE, has remained relatively unchanged since the formation of the service in 2013. In terms of the prevention work, we work with key partners such as the Scottish Wildfire Forum, landowners and Forestry and Land Scotland to help develop a multi-agency prevention agenda and influence the introduction of key policies in the future.
Significant work has been undertaken with partners and stakeholders to increase the awareness of the risk of wildfire. So we focus on seasonal messaging and key themes will be continued to develop, which provide clear information on how to prevent wildfires from starting and how to reduce the impact of any such fires. In the partnership with the Scottish Wildfire Forum, we will review the distribution of the wildfire danger assessments that are shared with our partners and measures on how effective they are in preventing wildfires. So to give you some context in terms of what we're doing to plan for wildfires, we have wildfire danger assessments. So this is a new template that we use to help identify land masses, and we can do some pre-planning and look at how we would deal with a potential fire in recognised areas. So we will look at access, response, resources, partners. So that's a fairly new template that is part of our approach to dealing with the preventive element prior to wildfires starting. The SFRS are also implementing a tiered classification of fire stations for wildfire response, including the new rollout of specialist vehicles, so equipment and PPE. So this is a tiered approach which involves 3 tiers. So our tier 1 is basically our first responders, so they are trained. That's augmented by strategically located specialist teams, and they're classed as tier 2. So these we have 15 tier 2 stations across the whole of Scotland, and then we have 10 tier 3 stations, and these have a cadre of tactical advisors, which are tier 4, so they support the operational crews with tactical advice on how to approach and deal with a wildfire effectively. Obviously this requires varying levels of training and equipment and PPE based on the stations that I've just mentioned, and it represents a significant investment for the fire service nationally. It's something in the region of £1.6 million that has been spent to implement this strategy. Locally, we have 1 tactical advisor, so 1 tier 4 operator in the local area, and they're part of a national cadre of 12 tactical advisors that cover the whole of Scotland. We have 2 stations in the local area currently undergoing training and upskilling to the tier 2. Those stations are New Galloway and Langham, and we have also implemented recently a new operational assurance system for personnel to allow them to feed in information on operational performance. It hasn't yet been produced any information for the recent fires in the Galloway Forest Park, but I'd like to add that due to the geography of the area, that particular incident did pose us some significant challenges, but was largely managed effectively by the use of helicopters because the terrain involved proved challenging for operational personnel. So slightly different from some of our more other wildfires. This particular fire had a slightly different approach, but that was managed effectively through good partnership working with Police Scotland colleagues, Galloway Mountain Rescue, and obviously landowners with the provision of helicopters. So I'll pause there and happy to take any questions.
Councillor Donald.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for that detailed response. It's heartening to know strategies being developed or refreshed. And it's also heartening to know about the money that's being invested. I mean, you work in an ever-changing environment, don't you? It's like what was a big deal 2 years ago isn't a big deal now, and it's something else that's coming over. So it's really good to see that the focus is on that, and good to see a big focus on prevention. So I look forward to seeing the strategy in due course. Thank you so much for that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Beretti.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm probably going to ask something similar about that particular fire in the Galloway Forest Park. One of the things that we forget about, and given the fact that I remember one that happened in virtually the same place in the late 1970s that lasted a lot longer than that, the crews that go are certainly, they're not full-time when they come from Newton Stewart and other places. What's the support given to the families of those crews if they are on extended call-out duty? Because clearly you will have to factor in other crews coming from other locations. And the other thing I was thinking of, I'll just make a note. Having said what I said about the 1970s, are you looking at advice from international fire teams and how to deal with these types of fires, especially when they are in isolated areas? And way back in the 1970s, there was no helicopters. So is that something that you're actively looking at?
Thank you, Councillor Beretti. Yeah, so to give you reassurance, you're quite correct. The vast majority of operational personnel across Dumfries and Galloway are what we class as on-call. So they live and work in their local communities, have primary employment jobs, so they respond to a pager and obviously have to give up their full-time employment to come and respond to incidents. So establishments and stations and all-call stations we generally, for a one-pump station, the establishment is 12 personnel is the kind of target operating model that we would look to use. So that gives us flexibility, so we over-establish, so we have resilience built into the stations, because obviously in terms of responding to protracted incidents, then we have to consider crew welfare. So the way we manage that is through the rotation of crews. So generally operational crews have a window of operational activity around about 4 hours. So again, that allows us, so we would look to have reliefs and rotate crews on a 4 to 6 hour rotational basis, depending on topography, time to get there. So the way we do that is by over-establishing stations to have that built-in resilience that allows people time to get back. But your point about supporting families, we have no specific support. We have welfare facilities that will provide at instance for the operational crews on the ground, so they can get hydration, they can get food, they can have rest breaks. Obviously wildfires are physically demanding types of incidents, so crew rotation and crew rest is a key component of an incident commander's decision making at those types of incidents. We will rest and rotate our crews to allow them time to recover on the hillside. In terms of your question about obviously the not having helicopters, yeah, we are working so obviously with international partners. So the wildfire danger assessment that we referred to earlier is actually taken from the Canadian model, and we have tweaked that for Scotland to take into account the Scottish vegetation and the Scottish land. So we use that international process, but we have tweaked it for the Scottish environment. The Tier 4 operatives, the tactical advisors, have done work with colleagues from across the UK. They underwent training in Northumbria, because Northumbria within the UK is considered subject matter experts, so they have experienced instructors. So the staff from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service have participated in development of their skills as a tactical advisor through colleagues from the Northumbria Fire and Rescue Service. We have in the past reached out to our European colleagues as well, previously for information and learning experience from colleagues in Greece and other parts of Europe and some of the wildfires they've experienced. So there is a multifaceted approach to dealing with the challenges that wildfire poses, because as already been highlighted, these types of incidents aren't going to go away, and with the changing climate, they're only likely to increase in frequency and duration.
Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. That was interesting about the Canadians. They've got bigger forests than we have. The interesting thing, though, is that, as you can imagine, fires, and certainly in wildfire areas, will happen at any time of the day or night, any time. So when you've got crews that are in very rural areas and they may have family commitments, are you looking at anything to maybe support that? Because I know it's not always possible to have a full complement if one of your crew members has got a family problem, or whatever it could be. It could be a child being ill, wife being ill, they could be ill. So are you looking at that in the future?
Yeah, your points are valid. There's lots of moving factors to how or when people are available and able to respond. Not just for wildfires, but for any incident. We ask our crews to provide a prediction of their availability in advance. That allows us to then manage their availability to us, but also manage their commitments to their personal life and their family. So we have a system called GARTAM, which gives individuals the ability to book themselves available within 15-minute increments windows, so they can change their availability at very short notice. So we use that system to track and monitor the availability of resources. So if we had a particular station that was proving challenging because of availability, because short notice changes, because that does happen, we have the luxury to reach back, and obviously we have part of our national service, so we can reach back to other areas, out with Dumfries and Galway for support, and that's what we would do. So incident commanders are very attuned to obviously the needs of their staff. Staff can approach their officer in charge and make them aware at an incident that if they have something they need to be back for, we can make arrangements to have them removed from the incident ground and replaced by other members of staff. So we do consider that, but as you'll appreciate, the nature of any incident is very dynamic, and there's an onus on the individual to be upfront about their availability and their commitment to their family and obviously to ourselves.
Thank you, Scott. We've got Councillor Slater.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the report today. As regard wildfires, I used to work in an aircraft company, it was all helicopter, and that type of work sometimes come up, and I realise how difficult it is for you to get to some of these, because these forests are quite enormous, so they are, and you can't really walk through them, and getting water there is a problem. Now, I'm not sure now if they use some companies use powder now to drop in the fires, and some still use water. I'm not sure which you still use water. The difficulty is finding a lock or something nearby, and the time to fly. The helicopters certainly help, but I have to say they're becoming very expensive to use. In some cases, I do about £1,000 an hour sometimes. You can get that flying hours. You don't pay for the ground hours, but you pay for the flying hours. But it is becoming a lot more expensive. And it obviously put a drain on your resources, but that's sometimes the only way you can get to a fire by using an aircraft. I don't see any way, other way forward than that. I think the helicopter is the answer to the remote fires, but the cost can be extremely high. One other point, there was a fire on the walkway near Heath Hall recently. I reported it to the council, and there was an elderly lady rather worried in case it got near her house, because it happened a few years ago, similar thing. I just wonder, I did report it to the council, but I haven't heard anything back yet. I think it was as you go into Heath Hall from the garage side, and there's a walkway there at the traffic lights. I think it was down that area there on the side where the house is there. I just can't remember the name of that. It's the house and estate on the right as you drive towards the traffic light. And it was there, so I don't know if you know any more about it or not. Thank you.
I think that's probably a difficult one for the officers
Okay,
to
I
answer
just
here.
thought I'd mention
If they could come back to you directly on that one.
Okay.
In regards to the specific issue you mentioned, I'm not familiar with it, but we can certainly go and look at it. Again, advice to anybody, if you have any sign of smoke or fire, then call 999, call us out, and we'll respond and deal with it appropriately. Your point about helicopters is, I completely agreement. Obviously, that's why part of the work that we do is engagement with landowners, because obviously the fire service have no recourse for helicopters. That is a discussion that we will have tactically, the Incident Commander will have with the landowner and Forestry Land Scotland to see who is the most appropriate person to take on that burden. Because you're correct, there's a significant cost associated with a helicopter response at a wildfire incident, but we have no, the fire service, just for clarity, have no recourse to helicopters. It's a discussion with the landowners.
So, sorry, Chair, who pays for the helicopters, and does it come out of your budget? Is that what happens? Or does it come from a government budget?
No, it comes from the landowner. So that's, like I've said, it's a discussion with the landowner at the time as to do they have recourse, whether it's through their insurance or another arrangement, or depending where the fire is, if it's Forestry Land Scotland land or a private landowner, we would generally have that discussion with the landowner to see if that's options available to us.
Okay,
Thank you for that. Councillor Howie.
Sorry,
Thank you, Chair. So,
just add one thing,
Yes.
Councillor Slater, based on what you said before regarding fires and cyclopaths. We have an agreement with local crews that any time they are sent to a what's suspected deliberate fire, we will inform Police Scotland at the earliest opportunity to kind of build that, regardless how small it seems. Every single fire will be reported to Police Scotland. That's a local agreement that we run with our crews in the area to build up a picture. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howie now.
thanks, Chair. Page 24, looking for an explanation of the difference between retained and volunteer systems. And I see highlighted in the report that Dromore is a volunteer system. Why do they fall into the volunteer as opposed to being retained?
Thank you, Councillor Howie. So a legacy arrangement, so across Dumfries and Galway, we only have one volunteer unit, and that is Dromore. So the difference between the volunteers and the on-call stations is that the on-call colleagues, they are paid a retaining fee, and they are then paid for an hourly rate for their attendance at instance. The volunteer unit at Dromore is exactly that. They receive no payment, they volunteer their time. So, and the main difference in terms of managing that resources, like I've mentioned previously, the on-call staff use a system called GATAM, where they select their availability, and we track and monitor their availability. The volunteers at Dromore, they do not have access to the system at GATAM, so they do not show up. They are there, and they volunteer their availability as and when. So that's the key difference between the on-call stations across Dumfries and Galloway and the volunteer unit. I hope that answers your question.
Councillor Howe?
Is volunteers common throughout Scotland, volunteer service?
So of the 8 legacy fire authorities, yes, I believe my understanding is that most of the legacy authorities had some type of volunteer units across their legacy areas, and they still exist in the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Sorry, Councillor Stitt.
Just a wee. I spoke to the fire service last week, and it's good to see that we've got a good uptake of staff now. I think I was talking to about 10 of them, so it's quite good. And I think they're still recruiting, I think. Just say thanks very much, because it used to be a bone of contention at some of our meetings.
Thank you. I should have had that as a standing item in your agenda. In that case, if we can go to the recommendations, our members we've been asked to scrutinise and comment the performance reports for the period 1st April to 2024 to 31st March, which I think you'll agree we've done that. Thank you. Go to item 5, Police Scotland local plan performance summary update 1st April 24 to 31st March. Chief Superintendent Stephen Meeko and Superintendent Alison Wilson are here to assist members if they have any questions. Do you have anything you'd like to add to the report?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Thanks for the introduction and invitation to today's Police, Fire and Rescue Committee and the opportunity to present our annual performance update. As you say, I'm joined today by Superintendent Alison Wilson, who is the Superintendent Operations for the division. Before I take any questions from members that they might have in the report, as I've done previously, I just wanted to highlight some matters relative to the last 6 months, which may be of interest to members here today and those who are viewing today's meeting online. The recent murder in Ayrshire of Caden Moy and a violent incident involving teenagers at Portobello Beach has contributed to increased commentary and media coverage around the issue of young people and violence. Officers in Dumfries and Galloway will continue to conduct intelligence-led operations to recover weapons from those intent on bringing them into our communities. Those operations can involve the use of stop and search activity, which is a particularly effective policing tactic in securing a person's safety. Intelligence-led stop and search is a valuable and effective policing tactic and contributes to the prevention, investigation and detection of crime while keeping people safe. Last year in Dumfries and Galloway, our officers carried out 1,025 stop searches, 346 of which were positive. Year to date, we've undertaken 280 searches and 89 were positive. In terms of noteworthy arrests, a 46-year-old male from Dumfries was arrested and charged following a complex cryptocurrency fraud and firearms offences, which also resulted in the seizure of financial assets of £480,000. 3 males from the Leeds area were arrested and charged for a theft and attempted theft of an HGV and trailers in the Lockerbie trailer park. The total value of the assets was £250,000, and this followed a significant inquiry which was undertaken by our local CID officers. On the 18th of February this year, following an intelligence-led operation, officers from Dumfries and Galloway Road Policing Department and Specialist Crime Division arrested a female on the M74, which resulted in the seizure of £43,000 worth of cannabis. Similarly, on the 20th of March, our road policing officers seized cocaine and cannabis to the value of £20,000. Police Scotland's Violence Against Women and Girls strategy sets out to create a society where women and girls live free from violence, abuse, exploitation and harassment. And as a division, we are embedded as part of the local Violence Against Women and Girls partnership. Police continue to chair both local MARAC victim and MATAC suspect forums. Excellent relations with partner agencies within these arenas also continue to ensure a collective of support to those victims of domestic abuse in our communities. We continue to work with our partners to improve the services we deliver to the communities we serve. I can report in the last 12 months we have secured convictions and prison sentences of over 100 years for individuals involved in serious domestic abuse and sexual offending. Following my last update to the committee, I undertook to address concerns from community council chairs around police attendance at community council meetings and review our approach to this. As a reminder, in addition to local area committees across Dumfries and Galloway, there are around 85 community council meetings per month, which are serviced by 26 community policing officers. We have tested a refreshed model of holding collective monthly meetings with community council chairs, which are attended by our local area commanders and locality inspectors. We offered these meetings in this format recently, and whilst there were some challenges in embedding the new format, overall there was positive commentary from the committee chairs on the approach, who agreed it was a helpful method of engagement and local scrutiny. I'm pleased to update the committee that DESK, our digital evidence sharing capability, which revolutionises the way we collect and process digital evidence throughout the criminal justice system, is now live in the division. DESK is an enabler for many of the innovations and improvements that are being rolled out, which includes body-worn video. The rollout is on track to be completed in autumn of this year. Since implementation throughout Scotland, there have been, as at the 30th of April 2025, over 160,000 pieces of digital evidence accepted onto the system, 53,695 images uploaded, 889 mobile phones potentially no longer required as evidence, and 10,580 hours of footage uploaded. In addition to the benefits of managing evidence digitally, over 20,000 officer hours have been saved due to reduced time spent collecting evidence, and almost 100 tonnes of CO2 has been saved due to reduced mileage for evidence collection. In this context, it would require planting, I am told, over 3,000 trees to offset this potential volume of CO2. Feedback from the communities we serve has been positive too, with 86% of those surveyed said they found it easy to upload evidence, and 89% felt confident in using DESK again. And finally, excuse me, related to that, I expect that officers in our division will receive body-worn video towards the end of this year. So, Chair, those are my main points of introduction this morning. I'll stop there, and myself and Alison will be happy to take any questions from the members. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll open it up to member debate, and again I'll ask Councillor Dorward if she'd like to table her question relating to Police Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Welcome, Superintendent Wilson, to your first committee. Thanks, Chief Superintendent Meikle, for your summary. My questions focus on page 60, protecting people most at risk of harm, and obviously you've heard them, but I'll read them out for the benefit of my colleagues of this committee. So they are as follows. How is the demographic people most at risk of harm? How do you define that from a police perspective? What indicators do you use to differentiate between sexual crime and rape? You said in the report that non-recent crime accounts for 21% of sexual crime. How does this affect the detection rates for recent crime? How many of sexual crime and rape offences were committed against women over the past 5 years? And for both of those crime categories, what is the conviction rate versus the detection rate over the last 5 years? And finally, a question about hate crime, which has increased by 67% in the region. I'm hoping you can give an overview of the causes of this increase. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, thanks, Councillor Dorward, and thanks for advance notice of the question. So I'll take them one by one then. So the first one in relation to how is the demographic defined. So this typically refers to crimes and offences in respect of violence against women and girls in the context of sexual offending and domestic abuse. Those are the main demographics when we consider people most at risk of harm. In terms of the indicators we use to differentiate between sexual crime and rape, the term sexual crime is an overall term we use to all sexual offences. So that could be attempted rape, indecent communications, voyeurism, rape and sexual assault. In respect of question 3, non-recent crime means any crime which has occurred over 28 days ago. And in the Dumfries and Galloway division, our 5-year detection rate for rape crimes is 76%, which I'm pleased to say and acknowledge is the highest anywhere in Scotland. In respect of how many sexual crime and rape offences were committed against women over the past 5 years, I'm not able to provide you with the exact breakdown. However, it will not come as any surprise for me to say to you that sadly women and girls tend to be the victims of the vast majority of sexual offending across the division and indeed the rest of the country. In respect of question 5, in respect to crime categories in relation to the conviction rate versus the detection rate. So we, Police Scotland, don't routinely hold conviction rates for every offence that we report to the Procurator Fiscal, and this could actually only be provided by the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service. But I have referred to some of the notable convictions in my introductory comments, which I hope provides you with some context and assurances in that regard. In respect of what are the causes of the increase in hate crime in the region, so online activity, and again you'll not be surprised, I'm sure, for me to tell you this, social media commentary, posts, has driven more reporting of hate crimes generally to us in the division and us as a force nationally. And a significant proportion of our recorded hate crimes are also committed against police officers in particular, and that's usually in the context of during an arrest or in custody, or officers otherwise being subject of some sort of verbal abuse. So those are the main contributors in respect to hate crime in the region. Thank you.
Councillor Dobbin.
Thank you very much for that. The detection rates are impressive, and it's heartening to see they're the highest in Scotland. That is really good. I think sometimes when folk look at a smaller division of Police Scotland in a region that's peripheral, they think they don't do very much. They do a hell of a lot, and that's really good. So thank you for that. I think the one of the things that you have just get a bit of clarification on. I can understand why the conviction rates aren't something that you would keep a record of. So would you suggest I write to Scottish Courts or the PF for that one?
So that would be a request to the Scottish Court and Tribunal Service if they can provide that information. We do, as I referred to, keep a record of certain high tariff offenders, as you would perhaps expect, but not for every single crime and offence that we report.
Thank you. On that same point, in days gone past many years ago, reporting, like certainly in the area of Strathclyde, reporting officers used to get a return from the court service on every case they put forward, and it was actually seen as a closure to the officer themselves in each particular case. I appreciate that it probably wouldn't be done nowadays, but it's amazing how things change over the years. Councillor Bretty.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Two observations and two questions, Chair. Thank you. Page 51, I particularly like the way that it's put out. It's much easier to read and take in that information straight away, so that's very useful. Also notice the fact that you've got the degree of international terrorism substantial. Maybe one thing that isn't there and potentially could be included is what is the potential of cybercrime, whether it's international or local, or, national, regional, whatever. Would that be something that could be done? Plus, I like the fact that you've mentioned carbon savings. I'll put my climate hat on. Would you be able to send that kind of information to the climate group or climate officers, because that is and should be fed into our D&G climate reduction strategy as things that are happening in D&G to reduce carbon. The two questions I have is, on 53 you've got talking about the drug-related deaths, but has naloxone made or had an impact on that overall issue throughout the year, since you've now got most of the officers on and kitted out with that? And you did mention about the community councils. Now, I've had community councils asking me about this new way of doing things. Some of them don't seem to know that it's on. Some of them don't seem to understand the necessity of why you've done it or what it means for them. So is there things that you think are not working, and what do you think actually could be done to make it better?
Thanks, Councillor. So I'll try and take those one by one then. So in respect of the cyber issue, I'm not sure that it would be possible to represent that in the report as such. Clearly, we get sort of regular feeds of intelligence nationally around the likelihood of cybercrime being committed across the force. But whether it would be, I think it's probably unlikely that we could articulate that in the report in its current form, to be perfectly honest with you. But I'm happy to look at that. In respect to the climate issue, yeah, happy to feed in any issues or any sort of figures or facts or figures that you think would be helpful. Just of note, we are piloting in the division as part of our health and safety structure. I can't remember now the correct terminology, but it's effectively a climate change group, believe it or not. We're looking to see where we can create climate improvements, efficiencies within the division, and Superintendent Robinson is actually leading on that piece of work. So again, happy to kind of feed that back to you informally off table if that would be helpful. In respect of the deployment and use of naloxone, you're correct. All the officers in Dumfries and Galloway have been trained and equipped with naloxone. I don't have in front of me the current use rate of naloxone. I don't know if Alison would have anything on that, but again, happy if not, just to come back to you with a flavour of the number of times it's been deployed and whether it's been successful. But I do know it has been in the past. In respect to community council, so as I alluded to in my introductory comments, it was a sort of mixed views on this. I think there was some challenges around communication, which we are going to continue to work on with the community council chairs. However, I would just go back to the point around we do have a finite resource available to service the needs of the absolute, the needs of community councils. So we are just trying do it in the most efficient way that we possibly can, maximising the use of resources that we have, and balancing that with the need to provide local scrutiny. But I do know, excuse me, the two area commanders, Duncan and Emma, are working very closely with community council chairs to improve the communications, and we will tweak and refine the model going forward so that it meets everyone's needs. Thank you.
Councillor Brenton.
Yeah, that's good. I think the community councils are the ones who look forward to a constable turning up. They're always sad when they never see one, but this is good that something is going to be given to them to at least help them understand. And as I've said, that they're probably going to see a more strategic element to it rather than just what's local, because they might just be local, but things are happening outside. So I think that's important. I'm happy that you have got a climate group coming. We'd love to see them and maybe even get them to our new subcommittee at some stage, but that would be something we can work on. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Slater.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's page 55, and some of the stats, like serious assault is actually well up, I must admit. That's one that... A robbery is obviously slightly down, which is good. I'm just looking, disorder complaints are down, which is good. Vandalism is slightly down, not by a lot, but it's slightly down. But the interesting one is drug-related deaths. And all these three obviously seem to go together here, because drug-related deaths is down, drug supply appears to be down, and drug possession is down. So I assume I take that as that they're making inroads into that, hopefully. Driving influence is up, but is that because of drugs or alcohol, or both? And
Superintendent Meikle.
sorry?
Carry on.
Sorry?
I didn't say anything. Carry on.
Sorry?
If you'd like to carry on with your question.
Oh, right.
You've got your microphone off again.
It was on. I don't know why I must have touched it by mistake. Sorry. It was just some of the stats here that I was asking about. Obviously, driving under influence, which is well up. And really the question there was, is that through drugs or alcohol or both? And it's nice to see speeding offences are down. Housebreaking slightly down. And fraud is much the same as what it was last year. And obviously sexual crime, and that's been covered by my colleague here. What I would like to say, I'd like to thank the police and the fire brigade for attending the Oasis Centre the other day there to show what they can do to help the youth of the town. And it was really good to see that. So I have to say thank you for that. It was nice to see defibrillating, showing how to revive somebody, hopefully. And it was also good to hear that Operation Safety is still running after all these years, because we were heavily involved in that, and we supplied 8,000 square feet of the unit, and it was all primary 7 kids over a period of 3 weeks, so about 1,500 of them. So it was really nice to see that is still carrying on, and I'd like to thank you for coming to that event the other day there. Thank you.
Thank you. Your comments are noted. Is there anything you'd like to respond to that?
Excuse me, thanks, Councillor. I'll just make a couple of observation comments on that. So, you're right. So, in relation to violent crime, I have to say, and I regret to say, this is a pervasive challenge for officers in the division. For some context, though, broadly speaking, I don't see any specific trends in terms of repeat victims accused or locations. Rather, what I do see is individuals resorting to violence in the spur of the moment act due to perhaps long-standing feuds with other parties or drug-related feuds. And there was 40 assaults last year and police officers and staff. Your question, I suppose, around the increase in driving under the influence, yes, it is predominantly, we're seeing a huge rise in people who are driving whilst under the influence of drugs, cocaine, cannabis. We do have traffic officers with presumptive testing kits in the vehicles, but there is a substantial amount, and I see it on a day-to-day basis, of intelligence-led stops of individuals who are reported to us through Crime Stoppers, for instance, who are being targeted and successfully arrested and charged with those offences. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation and your report. I just want to touch again on the driving under the influence. It'd be interesting to know, is this because of, you've just hinted to a couple of things there in relation to intelligence-led, but is it, is the proportion of people being stopped and checked, do we have any sort of perspective in whether it's more stops producing more arrests, or is it a case of a higher proportion of those being stopped are sort of over the limit and such like, or under the influence of drugs? And then to turn to page 60, talking about the sexual crime and domestic abuse and such like, it sounded quite impressive when you said that you'd had convictions for about 100 years or so for people involved in domestic abuse and sexual crimes. But when you look at the number of offences there's over 2,000. What is the conviction rate in relation to domestic abuse? Because it's obviously quite difficult to sort of get evidence on many occasions, as it is with sexual crimes. So rather than sort of 100 years, can you give us some sort of indication as to what our conviction rate is in relation to that? Thanks. And what support do we have for the victims, and particularly in relation to domestic abuse? I think sexual crime, it's quite overtly, there's a support in place, but for domestic abuse, it's not always so obvious. So if you could assist me with that, thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'll try and answer all of those points, and if I miss anything, I'm sure you'll come in. So, get back to road safety and road crime. So, my observations would be we've got 2,611 miles worth of roads within Dumfries and Galloway. We have dedicated teams of road policing officers, circa 40 in number, whose day-to-day duty is to go out and address road safety and road crime. So they are fully committed to doing that. So as part of their day-to-day business, they will conduct enforcement through using marked and unmarked vehicles, ANPR, which is intelligence-led policing. In addition, layered on top of that, we've got the regular reporting that I referred to that comes through Crime Stoppers. So there is very much an enforcement-led, intelligence and enforcement-led approach in the region. The prevalence of drink and drug driving is a societal issue. It is not specific to Dumfries and Galloway, but what we are seeing is more and more individuals, drivers of a kind of certain age, who use recreational drugs and choose to drive. And my message clearly is not to do that. The chances of you being stopped and charged and arrested are significantly high. Your other point around domestic abuse, and the sort of two parts to that. So we do continue to see an increase in report of domestic abuse incidents. That is due to a number of factors, whether it be third-party reporting, so that could be incidents which are overheard by neighbours. It can come through statutory partners, through multi-agency meetings. and also in third sector reporting. And there's also a significant input that's given to our public sector and educational colleagues. I would again just kind of emphasise, I very much see that the increase in reporting of domestic abuse is a sign of confidence in the police to deal with these incidents, as historically it would be very much a crime that was held behind closed doors. From a sort of prevention lens, we also hold a weekly decision-making forum with partners to discuss DISTAS applications and make relevant disclosures where it's appropriate. And we've seen an increase of almost 300% of applications being submitted to us for this process, which allows victims to make informed decisions regarding their relationship that they've entered into, and provides us an opportunity to discuss some safeguarding tactics with them to manage any risks. And we do also, in terms of victim support, it's always a victim-centred approach we take, and we always give victims the opportunity for support post a domestic incident for referral into Women's Aid as an example. And again, the point or question you raise around conviction rates, I would just sort of reiterate my answer to Councillor Dorward, that we don't hold conviction rates for all of our offences. It's just around the more high tariff offenders we would record convictions. But that ultimately, though, that data will be available somewhere. It's just the most appropriate agency to provide it, and I would suggest that would be the Courts and Tribunal Service. I think that was all the points, unless I missed anything. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Perhaps you can get together with Councillor Dorward and put a dual approach to the court service and that one. Councillor McFarlane, does that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jameson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of areas I'd like to cover, both on page 53. The first of which is the reducing harm caused by substance misuse. I know Councillor Slater brought this up. We've got 25 confirmed drug deaths, and that's slightly up. We're down on supply charges and we're down on possession. And I've asked this question before, and it's probably a tricky one to ask. Is that because there's less emphasis on charging people using drugs or supplying drugs, or is it a trend that's going downwards? I say that with the suspicion that we don't see a reduction in drug use in young people, but you're closer to it than I am. So I'm just wondering, is that the increased drug supply, is it reducing, or are we just less able to catch folk that are supplying drugs? And in the drug possession, are we more tolerant with young people using drugs? That's the first area that I'd like a discussion on, basically. The second one is at the top of that page, which is the reducing violence and disorder, antisocial behaviour, particularly in this instance with young people. I'm using Annan as an example for a more general approach. We do have a lot of incidents, or recently incidents of young folk on motorbikes, etc. Young folk, because Annan's an open school, young folk just wandering into the school area, which so far has just reduced in fear and disorder, but not, and a wee bit of violence, but not anything more than that. But there is a danger that it could increase to be more serious. We've had good engagement with the police in Annan, exceptionally good engagement with the police to try and resolve these issues, and the council for that matter. One of the things that's cropped up is the age of these young people, and you may have less jurisdiction over younger people of a certain age. And I know often the case, especially the lads on motorbikes, they're wearing balaclavas, so there's quite a difficult job to identify them. Having said that, a lot of these groups have been identified, but there's a limit to what the police can do. So my question is that the case? And secondly, how effective are we working with social work and youth organisations to try and prevent and have some sort of restorative action taking place on these young folk? Thank you.
Superintendent Meikle.
Thank you, Councillor. So again, I'll do my best just to pick those questions apart then. So in relation to substance misuse, what I would say is we're focusing, from my perspective, again, using the resources that I have available to me, we're focusing on the high tariff offenders in the area. And we have a tactical tasking and coordinating meeting, which is held fortnightly, and that allocates targets to our response community and CID officers to address drug packages. What I would say is, although the figures in front of you are over the 5-year average, on a positive note, we have increased the drug supply cases from last year, and as you'll see, drug deaths are below the 5-year average. The sort of drivers for drug deaths in this region are somewhat unique. That the main sort of contributory factors is the use of synthetic drugs, which is a sort of concoction, as it were, of drugs that are being self-administered. Your question around the sort of ongoing issues in Annan. So firstly, just to give you that reassurance, it's an issue that I am well aware of, and there has been significant focus, as you've alluded to there, in recognition by the local community policing teams in Annan to address these behaviours, which, you're right, predominantly involves young people and the use of off-road motorbikes. And coincidentally, I've got another discussion with the Area Commander about that very issue tomorrow. We have seen some success in terms of detections, but you're right, there is limited punitive measures, shall we say, that the police can take in respect of young people in that sort of teenage age bracket. In respect to the use of off-road vehicles or motorbikes, I've been really clear with the teams that I expect that wherever these types of vehicles are used, unlicensed, unregistered motor vehicles, we take any and every opportunity to seize them. We have got plenty of powers to do that. We don't need any more powers to do it. We've got plenty at our disposal. It's just the challenge of stopping them at the time in a safe manner, I suppose, and also identifying them. But as you say, when somebody is effectively masked up, it can be rather difficult to do that. But I would just sort of go back to my point that it is an area of focus. It is something that we'll continue to work on until it comes to a conclusion. But I would also just take the opportunity to ask, and remind parents and carers to take responsibility for the children and young people under their care, to know where they are of a day, and it's not just a policing issue. In respect of involvement with partners, where we do have identified somebody who comes into contact with police, we'll have that kind of necessary interagency discussion. In terms of the footprint, though, of partners in the local authority in Annan, I have to say I don't have that answer to hand, but again, I'm happy to. I think Alison's got to come in on that, if that's okay. Thank you.
Alison here.
Thanks, Chair. So just in relation to antisocial behaviour, so the Safer Communities Partnership that we have established in Dumfries and Galloway, the antisocial behaviour subgroup is chaired by Chief Inspector Dodds. That does have membership in terms of social work and education. The next meeting of that is coming up soon, and I feel quite passionately about it and discussed it just this morning with Emma Dodds in relation to partners stepping up to the plate, and in terms of that whole collaboration, let's face it, we're not going to rest our way out of the problem. These are young people. We need a cohesive membership who all step up in terms of the different areas and facets that they can bring in terms of support, in terms of diversion, and in terms of support for local communities who are actually affected by it as well. So just for your own kind of awareness, that kind of wraparound with different agencies does take place.
Thank you for that. Councillor Jameson, answer your question.
It does, and thanks, Alison, for that reassurance. And I repeat, we've had good engagement with the police, particularly through our Arundel and Estill Area Committee, and we have got meetings set up just to try and enhance the collaboration and coordination, because Annan and other schools, secondary schools especially, are not enclosed. They don't have fences, etc., although we're trying to address that in Annan, but we shouldn't need them. And the risk of serious harm can't be ignored, but also the anxiety that it's raised. And I must also add that I agree with you. It's a whole agency, organisation and commitment, and it has to include the parents. And we need to try and help these young folk that are having their problems. So it's restorative as well as a management thing. So I'm encouraged by the organisation the police are putting into that, and I can only hope that we'll get everybody else up to the table when we're meeting Arundel and Estill later this month. Thank you.
Right, thank you for that. No further speakers. If we move to recommendation, we've been asked to scrutinise the report for the 1st April to 31st March, which we have done. As I mentioned earlier, I received a further question ahead of today's meeting. So can I ask Councillor Slater to table his question now?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The reason for the question is my constituents write to me about this ongoing situation. So I've asked it before, but I'm going to ask it similar again. I'm still concerned about the empty buildings being vandalised and in some cases set on fire, which is a danger to the people who enter these buildings, and in some cases use are seen on the roofs of some of these buildings. The concern is it's causing more cost to the fire service and the police, obviously because you have to attend. I was told at an earlier meeting the Fire and Police Committee, when I was informed it was up to the owners to make their building secure. It seems that someone or others will end up injured or worse as they continue to go into the buildings, yet nothing is done to stop people or youth centre in empty buildings doing more damage to them. So, in some cases, be set on fire. There's a high cost to this because of the time the fire brigade and the police continue to have to attend, where they could be better deployed somewhere else. These are continual situations with more media coverage. After a week or so, it has passed its old news. And any building I was in business, we had a good security lighting, CCTV and radio links to our provider, and also the police as well would attend if it was a false alarm. I realise it is not up to the police and fire service to protect the properties, especially empty buildings, but something has to be done to try and stop people running wild within them. It is time to hold meetings with owners to give advice and help to prevent situations like it's continually happening. So it would appear that injuries could occur, also people could be killed by entering empty buildings. Where there are problems, there are solutions. I really don't want to continue to attend these important meetings and these issues continue to happen. And obviously I've got to go back and speak to my constituents about that as well. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Before I hand you over to police and fire, it's also the council also have a responsibility for derelict buildings. So this was passed to building standards, and I have a brief response from them. So building security is ultimately the responsibility of the property owner. However, building standards have certain powers to act when the owner cannot be located or fails to cooperate with the council by ignoring requests to act. Recently, we exercised powers to secure the former Nithbank Hospital site in Dumfries. The powers, however, are limited to the minimum necessary steps to ensure safety, typically boarding up windows and doors and erecting Harris fencing. They do not extend to the higher levels of security such as CCTV. It's important to note that before the Council can intervene, a legal process must be followed, allowing owners the opportunity to carry out the necessary work themselves. This could sometimes result in frustrating delays and create the impression of inaction. Despite this, most of the property owners are responsible, and a significant amount of work is carried out by the Council, Police and Fire Service to engage with owners. If we could pass you over to the police first. Yep.
Thanks, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor. So, obviously, the last PFRC, you raised the matter with me in relation to derelict buildings, and I'll just give you the sort of policing context around that. So, obviously, there's a potential there for the likes of cannabis cultivations, and whether there's anything the local policing teams can do about this along with partners. So, I do know the council have agreed to flag up any properties that they would consider to be vulnerable to us in terms of cannabis cultivations or other illegal use that you're referring to there. And certainly, based on the recent findings of the town centre officers, they try to check vacant properties as far as possible. And we also have an officer who's been assigned as a point of contact to share any relevant information with the council. But I do have to say that, you know, the vast number of properties in Dumfries and Galloway, which is not unique to this council area, makes that a challenge. And whilst I'm not saying, you know, that the arrangement we have is perfect, we have extra issues that most of the buildings in the region, the owners exist elsewhere in the UK, and aren't easily accessible or visible in the area. But we do have our town centre officers, they do have good relationships with our local retail workers for reporting any suspicious activity in any of the derelict buildings, and we will act on those reports as and when we get them. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the Fire Service like to comment?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the question. So, just to confirm what's already been discussed, yeah, and the Fire Service have no legislative powers, obviously, to enforce property owners to do any kind of work to secure the premises. But as we've just heard, we are part of that wider partnership. We work together with our colleagues to make a difference, to minimise the risk to young people accessing these buildings, and also to our own personnel. To give you some examples and give some reassurance to members, where we rely quite heavily on intelligence. So when we receive that intelligence, we use that information to obviously conduct briefings. So we'll create briefing notes and information. That information is then shared with operational crews in terms of the potential hazards and risks in any given particular site. And one of the key examples of that piece of work is the multi-agency incident response guide that we have created for obviously the former Gates factory. That is still a live document and is currently about to be updated. So we do those pieces of work. In terms of the engagement work, maybe pass on to my colleague Scott here, and he can talk a bit more about the engagement work that we do. But we are proactive in schools, and we are, make a conscious effort to engage with young people to make them aware of the dangers associated with disused and unoccupied buildings. So there is a clear focus there in primary schools and all our community events where we are trying to communicate this message. And we have used the recent events, tragic events that occurred in the northeast as a point to help focus that discussion when we're engaging with young people. So, yeah, whilst there is work for duty holders of premises to take on and honour their responsibilities, as a service, working with our partners, we are trying to promote a safety message to young people about the dangers associated with this. You know, whilst the building may be disused, it still has a value. So I think, sometimes it's about the language that we use around buildings. So we talk about derelict and disused and vacant buildings. Lots of these buildings are just disused, so they're just waiting to be brought back to use. So there's a value associated with those buildings. So I think, we are trying to communicate with young people around about that messaging. Scott, is there?
I think Scott's covered most of it there. We do give seasonal messages about these buildings. We are also very reactive. So after the recent fire at Gates, myself and my colleagues were at Heathall and Locker Briggs. We will target those nearest schools with the young people there, both primary and secondary. Scott alluded to as well, we're changing the message slightly as in terminology. I think that has a big effect on the young people, you know, from abandoned to derelict. Something we know value is almost like, you know, it's a free-for-all. We can just go in there, having the dish used, and we're also putting the message across now it is an actual crime. So it's no different to go into Gates as it would to essentially to mine your houses. And that seems to be getting through. Tragic events in the northeast, it's no longer a threat to these young people. This can happen when you have a kind of lived example. You know, these were young people very, very similar, doing a very, very similar thing where somebody lost their life. It does tend to hit home a lot more, so it does. But yeah, like we say, we're kind of, our hands are tied with various things, but we're engaging as much as we can to our awareness of these things, and we're taking different tacks with the terminology used and the fact that it is a crime, and you know the kind of lived example of the fatality in the northeast, unfortunately.
Thank you. Before I go back to Councillor Slater, is there any other members who would like to come in at this point? No, Councillor Slater.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for. I understand that you're restricted. I do understand that, but I feel that it's continually ongoing, and somebody could be killed, and it's also taking up your valuable time when you've got to attend these instances. You've got to go there, and the police as well, and it's ongoing. And what's the answer to this? I mean, recently the factory shop in Irish Street, I raised that situation, but now it's going to have a dangerous building notice fitted to it. So that's one good thing. That hopefully the owner will start to maybe in that case do something more about the building. But I realise it's very difficult. But there has to, whether there's a problem, there is a solution. So hopefully a solution can be found. Whether the law needs to be changed or whatever, but something really needs to happen in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dulmert.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually quite reassured by the responses given by yourself and our Police and Fire Service and Dumfries and Galloway. And what you've actually recognised is the fact that the owners have a primary responsibility to manage their properties, and the response given by Chief Superintendent Meikle is, yes, the owners are quite hard to find sometimes, but the council's on that and their work. I think the good thing that I'm getting back is that work is being done. The issues will continue to happen because people are people. You can't give a guarantee. I don't think anybody, the council, yourselves, can give a guarantee these issues will not happen. So I think that's a difficult thing to guarantee, Councillor Slater. I think, but what we're getting back from, I think, collective responses that we are working on it and we are dealing with it. Unfortunately, there are quite a lot of derelict or vacant buildings in the area. And it's a huge issue. So right to bring it up, but I think I think what we should recognise is that people are working on it and doing the best that they can. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, if we go into the next one, this is one from myself on this particular occasion. Members may have seen a recent social media post apparently from a bus driver concerning 3 issues within Dumfries town centre, although I'm fairly sure this could be replicated throughout the whole region. It relates to difficulties, in this particular one, it relates to difficulties being experienced by buses regularly being unable to enter, particularly stands 1 on the White Sands, due to being blocked by parked cars and vans. Because of this, passengers using wheelchairs and child buggies are unable to use the ramp and are forced to disembark out with the terminus and very often on the main road. I'm advised that the police are regularly called, but either walk or drive by without asking. After 4 p.m, this is particularly a problem when it's alleged that local takeaway delivery vehicles actually they regularly park to use it as normal parking within the designated bus bays. It's also alleged that regular parking in the Burnstite Square area is obstructing buses from entering the stands and gridlocking the town centre at times. And the third issue is the frequent and illegal entry into the pedestrian area and parking. Now, it is appreciated that Police Scotland have openly stated that illegal parking is not a priority, but given that DPE is still some way off, I would ask that parking infringements, especially where obstructions are caused, be given attention and enforced when appropriate, depending on other duties, of course. I'm not suggesting that this is a daily occurrence, but I think occasional attention to this, I would suggest that if police acted and if fixed penalty tickets were issued where appropriate, that the offending motorists would soon get the message of perhaps a zero tolerance of this in our town centres. This would probably only be a much needed but short-term measure, as DP will hopefully be with us fairly soon. If I could pass it over to the police for comment.
Thanks, Chair. And so first of all, thanks for sort of reiterating the policies that were around our approach to illegal parking in the town and elsewhere, and also your comments just around that push to having parking deregulated, if that's a word, for the region. So in relation to that, the kind of specific issues then that you referred to, so the community policing team in Dumfries do and elsewhere do address the wider road safety issues when we have the resource available. Following you sending me on the posts, I had some checks done, and we have had some contact from Stagecoach around youth disorder in the Burnstite area when the Antisocial Behaviour Initiative ran last summer, and that was kind of noted to be effectively and did reduce antisocial behaviour in the area. I've also checked in relation to the matter of block buses. Reporting is limited, I have to say, on our systems, and I would probably assess that some of the incidents that you've referred to potentially haven't been reported to us, albeit I do know you mentioned delays in the 101 system, but ultimately our officers will respond as per our threat, risk and harm model, and you know, depending on what else is going on in the area, you know, if it's a matter of illegal parking, unfortunately, you know, that would sort of go down the list somewhat. But what I can give you some additional assurance around is we do have CCTV operators who regularly, as you know, monitor the town centre, and they will communicate or pass any issues direct to the community policing officers without having to go through the 101 system, as it were. I also had some checks done in relation to enforcement, which has taken place since January this year. Now, notwithstanding you know, what you've said and I've said around our enforcement policy or lack thereof, what I can say is, somewhat maybe surprisingly to you and to me, we've issued 247 parking tickets in the Dumfries Town Centre since January this year, and we've also charged 12 individuals by means of a report to Procurator Fiscal for driving in the pedestrian zone. But we've got to balance some of that enforcement approach with sort of education and common sense, as it were, because our teams won't normally go down an enforcement route if, for example, it's a delivery driver who's perhaps misunderstood the signs, or there's an individual with a disabled badge, let's say, who doesn't perhaps understand that that badge doesn't entitle them to park anywhere they like at all points of the day. So there is enforcement taking place balanced against the need for a degree of sort of common sense, and we're trying to take that education approach as well. But it is very much on the radar of the local community policing team.
Thank you for that. I must admit, it is quite surprising that there were 247 tickets issued into Fleece in this particular year. The police Scotland use social media themselves, and I think it would be quite good if they would actually publish it and make, to show that it is a priority and they're not forgetting. I'm not asking for a daily attendance, but I think when you get police officers walking past or driving past very, very obvious obstructions, and I've seen it myself, and not particularly going down, heading for Lorburn Street, for instance, not going, not apparently going to any particular call, that they actually stop and either have a word with them or in really serious offences and take it on board, just to keep it on the radar. It's not a daily police presence I'm trying to push, but I think it's the normal, in many of our town centres, it's now the norm because parking is not deregulated yet, and the police have stepped back from that issue. I think many members of the public, it's normal for them to park nearest to where they're going, irrespective of road markings. There can be normal legal spaces available, but if it's outside a betting shop or a shop, they'll park right outside it. It's to try and change before DPE comes along, and that hopefully that will be early next year. Sorry, was it Councillor Dorward? I think somebody wanted to. No. Oh, was it yourself? Sorry. Yeah, you want me to come back?
Thanks, Chair. I do wonder if there'd be merit in a walk around for the town centre. Perhaps there are community officers, members of staff from Stagecoach and elected members, if anyone wishes to join us. We can publish that on social media in terms of, a real-time review of the challenges at the bus stands, potentially, maybe some obstructions, because as my boss rightly says, obstructions would be our key focus, but clearly we want the free route of the bus to be not impeded. So if that would be of merit, then we're happy to organise that and can potentially contact you off table in relation to it.
I think personally I've done enough for walking the beat. I'll maybe leave that to the other officers. But thank you very much for that offer. Do any other members have any comments on that? Councillor Slater.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You mentioned obstruction. Yes, I understand that, obstructions, yes. But the thing in the town centre, the lines are pretty worn out and the signage is poor. So what I ask there is, if you give a ticket, it could be appealed and could be admonished. So I think to help you, if the lines were redone and the signage was redone, that would give more power to your elbow. I understand if you're parked within so many metres of a junction, yes, that's going to obstruction. But there's like Bank Street, Marks and Spencer's lorry has a time driving lorry. It's got to get to certain places at certain times, and many times it can't get round onto Irish Street because there's vehicles parked there. I must admit there is lines there now to try and stop that happening, but that is a continual problem for the driver because his time is limited. But going back to the signage in the town, some of the yellow lines you can't see them at all. So if you were to give them a ticket, maybe you could tell me differently, but people could probably appeal that ticket because the lines are broken, they're not right, you can't see them properly, the signage is worn out. So that gives them a chance to appeal. I ask your advice on that, I suppose. Thank you.
Right. As far as line is concerned, the council, we're currently going through that process just now in the lead up to DPE. We're looking at every single parking area in all our town centres, but particularly in Dumfries initially, because that will be the main focus when it kicks in, and looking at signage and road marking. So that is in the process. I don't think for 1 minute. I think if the linings were in difficulty of reading, the police would not issue a ticket in the first place. They may advise, but they wouldn't proceed in that. But your point is noted in that. Councillor Dorward, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just thank you on the back of your question. Thank you for offering the walkabout opportunity. I think visibility is really useful, and communication out with this forum is very useful as well. Perhaps more talking can be done at that point, which is actually quite useful. Can I suggest that perhaps you consider adding the community safety team in there as well, which might be a good way of rounding that off. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Slater, one more.
Thank you, Chair. It was just if there's cars almost hit some people in the high street when that they're not supposed to be there. Now, if somebody gets injured or hit by a car, where does the liability lie in this stage? Is it just the driver? Is it because the council allow cars into that area when they shouldn't? So there's a grey area here that needs to be, like, I think, sorted out. Thank you.
I think that question, if it is a question, is so general, it's a very difficult one to answer. Each case would depend on its own merits, and if it involved an injury, a road accident that involved an injury, the police would deal with it, and they would deal with it appropriately. We are currently going through a review just now of parking, in particular in all our 10 centres, but in Dumfries, so that will be borne in mind. But I don't have any other questions. No. In that case, thank you for your attendance today. The date of the next meeting is Tuesday, the 2nd of December. Thank you.